Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Budget 2024 coverage from the Office of the Leader of the Opposition. I'm Mervyn Williams. With me is Elson Lowe, Economic Advisor to the Leader of the Opposition. Elson, before we speak with our guests, let's spare a thought for the all-powerful Speaker of the National Assembly. Earlier today, during a presentation, a minister of government, what's his name again? Forgive me. I don't remember. Hamilton. I have to think food before I could remember the name. Finger foods. Mr. Hamilton, in his presentation, named former ministers of government, referred to children of former ministers of government as recipients of scholarships as though they were not entitled to scholarships as citizens of this country, but got them anyway through some backdoor means. That was the insinuation. The chief whip for the opposition stood on a point of order and made the point that names were being called of persons who were not in the assembly and could not have defended themselves. The speaker quickly got into action, saying that the minister has information that he will lay over in the National Assembly to substantiate what it was he was saying. Moments ago, Ganesh Mahaipal made references to some persons by name, and a minister of government objected, and the Speaker of the National Assembly upheld those objections. This is duplicity on the part of the Speaker of the National Assembly. This is plain bias. This is plain partisan support coming from the chair of Speaker of the National Assembly. It is undesirable. It is as undesirable as it is harmful to democracy in Guyana. Your comments, Elson?
Well, Marv, I think really what we need to see is a fair playing field in the House so that we can have, I think, the focus beyond the issues and not on remarks that should not be there. I was surprised earlier when the speaker did not stop even the Minister for Finance, who made some remarks I thought that were unparliamentary remarks. So we need to see better coming from the speaker, because it is, to my mind, not acceptable for the House to be constantly in a state of uproar over his decisions.
A rather refined way of putting it, I must say. But thank you very much for those sentiments. We now have a chat with Ganesh Mahaipal, Member of Parliament representing the constituency, the geographic constituency of Region 3, Essequibo Islands, West Demerara, the region from which those persons he named come from. Ganesh, welcome to our conversation on Budget 2024.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me, Mervyn. Thank you very much for having me, Elsa.
Budget 2024 heavily focuses on infrastructure development. You are a member of the Public Accounts Committee. The Public Accounts Committee clearly had an objective in mind, and that was bringing its work up to date. That has evidently been stymied by the change in the standing orders regarding the composition of a quorum in the Public Accounts Committee. With the emphasis on infrastructure, heavy spending, $1.1 trillion to be spent, how is the Public Accounts Committee prepared in the delivery of its mandate to address this whole question of public spending?
Well, the first point I wish to make is that this is the first Public Accounts Committee where we're lagging behind with reference to the Auditor General's report. Every other Public Accounts Committee before this one were up to date with the examination of the Auditor General's report. So this Public Accounts Committee needs to meet frequently so that we can clear the backlog and get up to date with the Auditor General's report. We have only, for the past 4 years, completed one Auditor General's report, and that is the 2016 Auditor General's report, which we picked up from what Irfan Ali left off as chairman. So for 4 years, we have not managed to bring as yet the 2017 and 2018 report to the National Assembly. The problem is the Public Accounts Committee is the guardrail of our democracy. And that Public Accounts Committee examines the expenditure in these respective budgets. We have had the 2020 Auditor General report out already, 2021 and 2022. We see a pattern in these reports where the accounting officers of the respective ministries, regions, and departments continue to breach the Fiscal Management and Accountability Act and the Procurement Act. In order for us to correct that, the Public Accounts Committee has to examine what is it that they did so that we can provide recommendations to better the system. We cannot do that with this current regime because Gail Teixeira and Bishop Edgell continue to miss the meetings whenever it's scheduled, and it causes us to not have meetings because the quorum requires the presence of 2 government ministers. There are 3 other members from the government side that are sitting on the Public Accounts Committee, but they have no weight. Whatever, it's always Gail and Edgell. And whenever Gail and Edgell can't make it, they don't have that confidence in their 3 other members. So really it's a Gail and Edgell team.
Is it confidence or control?
They don't have I would say confidence and control, because even when we do co-rate and the 3 other members are sitting there, they say absolutely nothing. It's as though they don't know what they have to say or do, and they just sit and take up a seat. But the point is, Marvin, with a broken Public Accounts Committee, the government is spending willy-nilly taxpayers' money unaccounted for, and they're afraid of us examining those accounts because of the level of corruption that is found by the Auditor General, and they don't want it to be exposed. So as much as they paint this gloomy picture that they are spending the largest budget ever, and this sum of money is for this purpose and that is for this, it is not doing what it was intended to do. Like, for example, the very 2 brothers in Wakenham that I spoke of, they would call PPP supporters in the dead of night and give them $250,000, and they don't have a criteria that you will use to ensure that the money is being spent as was intended for. When Ashley Singh stands up there and speak, he would say for the vulnerable, for the less fortunate, to assist in the cost of living relief and so on. But how do you measure these things? You must have a system in place that shows that Marvin Williams or Elson Lowe or Ganesh Mahipal is entitled. You just don't go and call people and give them out money like that. You are wasting the taxpayers' money. You're engaged in corrupt practices, and you're basically buying votes and trying to maintain. But I'm going to tell you something for the Marvin and Elson. There are many PPP people who are not getting it, and they're not feeling it like how some selected ones are. And I'm very optimistic that come the next election, these very people are going to show their real power by way of not voting for the People's Progressive Party that basically just have them as pawns in this entire game of chess.
I think those remarks are especially important given that between the last year's spending and this year's budget, you're looking at roughly 10 years worth of spending in only 2 years. So that makes the issues that you're raising, I think, even more urgent. One other issue you raised, which I think is really vital, is the question of education and education spending. We've seen the president say to the UN that there'll be 20% of the budget spent on education. Since we've seen oil money be included in the budget, the share of the budget spent on education not only has not met 20%, but has continued to decline. What are your thoughts regarding education spending in Guyana? You know also that the University of Guyana is a hot button issue. So I just want to know your thoughts on the national budget in this regard.
Well, education delivery is a decentralized program. So all the regions, they have a program called education delivery. And when you examine this budget, as much as they will say from the big gloomy sum of $1.146 trillion that education got a sum of money there, and they're jumping up for it. I think $100 and something billion. In these respective regions, there is a decrease in the capital subvention for regions 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. A decrease in the capital expenditure in comparison to last year and the year before. Now, how can you want to increase capital projects in these respective regions, treating our citizens equal across the country, and have a decrease in the capital expenditure for these respective regions? It goes to show that they don't care. The government don't care. I don't want to repeat like what has happened in Region 8 with the Madhya dormitory. Nobody wants that. But when incidents now happen, we will have to play it squarely at the feet of the Minister of Education, because she, as I said in my presentation, sat at a cabinet meeting, saw these numbers, had to see that there was a decline in capital expenditure at those levels in the respective regions. So when the regions cannot compete with Central Georgetown, what will be the explanation? Is it because our communities in the rural areas are doing so well now that you want to curtail it? I don't know, but you are clearly seeing that when the coalition was in office, the amount of monies we spent in rural communities have not only caused their standard of living to rise, but we also saw better performance in education. We saw improved health facilities. We saw infrastructure improvement. We even saw yields in the agriculture sector. So is this a methodology of punishing the rural communities to have them subjected only to you, and you have no focus on improving their well-being and their academic standing so that they can think for themselves? The PPP has a track record, and that track record is to ensure that people in rural communities don't get the amount of focus they deserve so that they can be empowered to make decisions on their own. And what the PPP does is go into these rural communities and they preach racism, they preach division, and they try to control at the bottom house level the narrative of who's bad and who's good. But people are becoming educated.
Before we wrap up this segment of the conversation on Budget 2024, Ganesh, the PPP has a record of ensuring that regions that they do not have political control over get very small capital budgets, and the bulk of the capital works that have to be done in these regions find resources. You would find that the resources for those projects are vested in the Central Ministry of Works. On the other hand, regions that they have political control over will get large sums of capital funding and less control of resources at the level of the central government. The same is true for housing, where, for example, in Region 3, the PPP has political control. They have a housing section, whilst in Region 4, a region that they do not control, they manage the housing sector for Region 4 out of the Central Housing and Planning Authority in the Ministry of Housing. Does this budget also conform to that kind of budgetary allocation, that discriminatory approach to allocation of resources? And if it does, how do you expect the various regions to perform?
Marvin, this government has no regard and respect for the elected officials in regions 4, 7, and 10 especially. And they even try to control, as you rightly said, the spendings at the central level, because it becomes easier for them to pocket. It becomes easier for them to decide which contractor will get which job. The system of governance that we have in this country allows for regional procurement and tender administration boards, but ministers don't sit at that level. So they don't get to decide directly unless they make phone calls and influence their regional executive officers, which oftentimes they do. But these large spendings, they have a greater control so that they can put it into their pockets. The essence of this regime is really to enrich themselves. And they are stealing so openly and making themselves richer by the day. And then they will just throw the crumbs and give it to the ordinary, hardworking citizens of this country. It's a sad reality. And we're in a sad state of affairs with the largest budget ever in the country's history, but yet the ordinary people are not being able to lift themselves out of the nightmare they find themselves in.
Thank you very much, Ganesh. We will pause again, and we'll be back with you with more discussion on Budget 2024 as our parliamentarians make their presentations in the National Assembly. We will speak with them immediately after, and we will provide this opportunity, Elson, for MPs to expand on their presentations as we are doing, having regard to the constraint of time in the National Assembly.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we look forward to engaging with you, our audience, as we continue today and then over the course of the week. So continue to stay tuned.
Stay with us. We'll be back. We will be back, and we will continue this conversation.